What if I tell you that you can get paid money for doing absolutely nothing? Now, for most people, that sounds like a scam, but not for dividend investors like myself. All you need to do is make your money start working for you instead of just working for your money. Now, I started dividend investing around 3 years ago, and so far I managed to grow my portfolio to over $10,000. That's why today I'm gonna share with you the 5 dividend stocks that pay me more than $400 a year so far. Hi guys, my name is Dennis, and in this channel I talk about personal finance as well as my continuous journey to financial freedom. Now, these 5 dividend stocks are some of the highest paying stocks in my portfolio when it comes to dividends, and they're also some of the safest stocks that I have in my portfolio as well. They're pretty much good and stable companies with a long-term standing history of paying their dividends, and I love having these type of stocks in my portfolio since it allows me to sleep better at night knowing that I'll be getting paid dividend paychecks every single quarter or even every single month without having to lift a finger. Now, the last stock that I'm gonna mention on my list is one of my favorite stocks to own, so you don't wanna miss this one. Now, let's kick things off with the first dividend aristocrat on my list and my personal favorite stock to own right now. And I'm talking about Realty Income, also known as ticker symbol O. This stock is what's called a REIT, which means Real Estate Investment Trust, and has been cash flowing for investors for over 31 years now, which is what makes it an aristocrat to begin with. What sets Realty Income apart is the monthly dividend payouts, providing a steady stream of income month over month. In comparison to most other dividend stocks in my portfolio, they only pay me money quarterly, but when it comes to Realty Income, they pay me every single month. Now, at the time of this recording, Realty Income has a dividend yield of around 5.91%, and that means that every single share that you own of Realty Income will pay you roughly around 26 cents every single month. This stock is especially hard to resist because its dividend income gets compounded monthly instead of quarterly like other dividend incomes. My monthly dividend paychecks from Realty Income gets automatically reinvested back into that same stock every single month, which means that my compounded growth for this stock is exponential. I started investing into Realty Income about a year ago as my own strange kind of way of getting into real estate because I didn't have enough money for a down payment for a house. Since Realty Income has a relatively high dividend yield, it forms a large chunk of my $400 yearly dividends. Now, next up on this list, we have a classic favorite stock of mine, which is Coca-Cola. This iconic beverage company has been quenching the thirst of millions around the world for the past century now. But did you know that they also own brands like Sprite, Dasani, Powerade, and even Smart Water? They currently have a dividend yield of around 3.23%, so that means that every single share that you own of Coca-Cola would pay you around 49 cents for every quarter of the year. Now, 3.23% might not sound like a high dividend yield, but when comparing it to a standard like the S&P 500's dividend yield, it's only 1.35%. When comparing those two together, Coca-Cola's dividend yield is actually much higher than the S&P 500's. Now, Coca-Cola has been a dividend giant for investors for decades now, especially for most famous investors we know like Warren Buffett, who's been holding onto this stock for probably longer than you and I were alive combined. I personally love to invest into Coca-Cola because of its rich history with over 63 years of consistent dividend increases. This makes Coca-Cola a dividend king, which is a step up than a dividend aristocrat. Not only does Coca-Cola offer a refreshing lineup of drinks, but it also offers refreshing streams of income for investors like myself. Now, I don't know what your favorite drink is, but it's most likely made by a brand owned by Coca-Cola. So grab your favorite drink, hit that like button, and we're moving on to the next stock. And this next stock is actually not an individual dividend stock like the other two were, but it's actually an ETF that pays you a dividend as well. This ETF is called PEY, which is the Invesco's High Yield Equity Dividend Achievers ETF. Now, this ETF focuses on companies with a track record of consistently increasing their dividends. And because of that, this ETF's dividend yield is 4.93%, which means that you'll be getting around 97 cents a year for every single share of PEY that you own. Now, PEY is a relatively new ETF that was put together around 20 years ago in 2004. But I see a lot of potential in this ETF since it's mostly comprised of many high-yielding dividend stocks that bring in profits on a quarterly basis. Now, PEY is an ETF that I recently only started investing into, but I personally feel that it's going to be a long-term ETF holding of mine. Now let's talk about AT&T, which is the 4th company on my list. and AT&T is a provider of telecommunications, media, and technology services. And a fun fact about AT&T is that its history dates back all the way to around 1876, which is around the time where Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. AT&T is such an old company that it has only one letter in their ticker symbol, which is T. Now, as of right now, its dividend yield is around 6.56%, which pays you almost 28 cents per share for every quarter of the year. AT&T has established itself as a firm foundation in many people's portfolios, including my own, since they've been paying their dividends consistently since 1989. The only issue with AT&T is that even though they have a much higher dividend yield than any other stock on my list, they actually recently lowered their dividend yield. This means that they don't have a consecutive amount of dividend increases anymore like other companies on this list. Now, I personally feel like this happened because of the highest inflation that we've ever seen in the past few years. With its relatively high dividend yield, AT&T actually contributes tremendously to my $400 a year dividend earnings. Now, moving on to the last stock on this list, which is SPHD, which is one of my most favorite ETFs that I own in my portfolio. This highly overlooked ETF combines the best of both worlds when it comes to high amount of dividends while having low volatility stocks in the S&P 500. What it pretty much does is focuses on blue chip dividend paying stocks in the S&P 500 that have a history of stable dividends. Now, SPHD is currently offering 4.15% dividend yield, which is crazy for an ETF. This means that you'll be getting paid around $1.75 yearly for every share that you own of SPHD. Now, SPHD's dividend yield is more than double that of the S&P 500, but the only downside is that the ETF growth rate is much slower than the S&P 500's. Plus, this ETF is still very young and it was only established at around 2012. I personally think that even though this ETF is pretty young, it will be continuing to grow parallel to the S&P 500 because they own the same stocks. That's actually why I like owning both SPHD and VOO, which is the S&P 500, because one gives me a good amount of growth and the other one gives me a good amount of dividends. All right, now let's do the math and see exactly how much money do you actually need to have invested to make $400 a year like I do. And if you take the average dividend yield of 4% that most people get in their portfolios, you'll actually need around $10,000 invested for a whole year to make around $400 in dividends. Now, $400 might not sound like a lot looking at it right now, but with consistent investments and reinvestments of dividends over the next 10 to 20 years, I can bring my portfolio to the point where I can start earning enough passive income to live off my dividends for the rest of my life. The harsh truth about dividend investing is that it does take a lot of time to build, and everyone has to start somewhere. That's exactly why I made this video right over here, where I explain to you how simple it could be to start investing with as little as $100. Also, let me know in the comments below if you want to see more videos like this one on my channel. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and like always, I just want you to remember that no matter what, everything is figure outable.